there another red light that comes on? Okay. Well, that's the
Would
YouTube
that
one.
picture be on the library website then? Yeah, okay, cool.
All right, we are recording. So we will call the library meeting to order today, Thursday, February 11th, 2021. We'll start with the approval of the order of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the order of the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, Mandy beat you to it, Steve. Mandy second the motion. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the order of agenda, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passed. Moving on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
This is Larry. So moved.
Is there a second?
This is Steve, seconded.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we will vote. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passed. Consent agenda approved. We'll now move on to the regular agenda. Do you want, Chris, would you like to introduce our first item?
I would, yes. Tonight we are joined by Joe Burgum of Folkways, and he is going to give us all an update on our project with our community input project so far and the most recent milestone that we've reached, which is completion of an event audit. So I will hand it over to you, Joe.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here with you this evening. Thanks for allowing me to come and present on the work that Folkways has been up to. I'm going to chat for about 10 minutes on some quick updates and want to leave some time for questions from all of you. I know it's been a couple of meetings since we last connected on this work and would love to get some insight from you before we move forward in the next phase. As Chris mentioned, since we last met and shared with you the work on personas, where we'd done interviews of users of the library, we dove into the event audit. We spent some time with the programming team from the library, learning from them about what they've been working on over the last couple of years as it relates to programming. And I have to say, as someone that does a lot of event organizing myself, I hope as a board that you're proud and understand the hard work that the team is doing. We were really impressed at the amount of events and programs that they're putting on. It's sometimes on average 3 a day. So that adds up to be a lot of events over a 12-month period. And reaching a lot of community members and citizens in West Fargo. So it was fun for us. It made the event audit a little bit easier because the team is doing such great work already. But we do have a couple of things that I wanted just to touch base on and share with you that we think could be good things to think about investing in terms of supporting the team and being able to do more great work. So kind of a couple high level categories that I'll dive into here. The first is marketing and storytelling. The second is operational software. And then the last one is diversity and inclusion. So when we think about the work that the library is doing, we were really blown away by the number of events and number of people reached. I know that the team's already thinking about these things. I know Ellen, who's doing marketing and communications, has been on for about a year. We had a series of things that we think could be somewhat low-hanging fruit to help increase the presence and storytelling of the library. So part of that is thinking about investing in professional photography. Having a inventory of great photos makes marketing that much easier, something that can last for a number of years, but does take a little bit of thinking up front to be able to get those photos prepared and organized appropriately. Being able to tag them in a photo software makes it really easy, but I think just knowing and thinking ahead to be able to have a professional photographer come. We know in the 21st century, people really want authenticity when they see marketing, and having photos of real people, real neighbors at events makes a big difference. We also talked about thinking about ways to reach audiences in a greater capacity. I'm just going to pull up my notes here from the audit so I don't miss anything. And so started thinking about some suggestions on targeted mail and direct marketing, some different ways to reach out. As you noted at the beginning of the meeting, today is Giving Hearts Day. One of our projects, the Red River Market, went through a similar training that Carissa and her team did through Giving Hearts Day. And there's a lot of parallels between the work that Impact Foundation does in teaching nonprofits like Friends of the Library to do storytelling. And I think the effort needed to make sure the community of West Fargo knows about all the great programming. So like I said, direct marketing, telling that story, great photos are all things that we have in our report submitted in much greater detail. One of the other things when it comes to storytelling that we think is really important, and this is an area that our work has touched on a lot, is thinking about how do we gather authentic feedback from users of the library. We think that user testimony, those firsthand stories about someone's experience at the library, a problem they overcame, help they received from staff, how it brought joy to their family, those firsthand narratives are so powerful in telling a story. So we talked with the programming team about ways to gather those testimonies through survey, through conversation. But we think that's another area to emphasize as the library continues to grow its footprint and think about into the future. What is the impact of the library? I know there's a lot of discussion about facility. And so we've been thinking about sort of, how does this outreach continue to support the work of the neighbors of West Fargo, loving the library and understanding the value of it. And those user testimonies are a great tool in that work. So the other area that we touched on in our event audit was thinking about systems and operations and kind of different tools to be able to support that. The team is managing a lot of content. From my perspective as an event organizer, it's pretty remarkable just in terms of the volume of events and how it's being organized. There's a number of event management systems. I think particularly some built solutions, something that Chris and her team can customize for themselves that I think could really improve the capacity of the team. Thinking about investing in an operational piece of software, like an event management software, so the team can do more outreach with the resources that they have. We saw that as a really key opportunity. Part of the benefit of using some sort of event management tool is to be able to more easily query information. So we've spent a lot of time taking those personas that we developed and overlaying them on top of all of the events that West Fargo is doing, the library is doing. And with a management system, it's easier to see gaps. You can ask yourself questions like, how many events do we run for seniors that take place on weekends? And really quickly understand how many events take place. There might be queries that you have as board members. Hey, are we reaching enough parents and youth? And do we do that outside of just the summer? And so being able to formulate those prompts and then look through the programming schedule can really give you a better insight of sort of those gaps and weaknesses, but also the strengths that exist. Being able to see, hey, we do a really fantastic job with this population, and then you're tracking all the metrics in there. So you have all that data in one place. We went through a tutorial or sort of a demonstration of some examples that we think could be helpful with Carissa and the team. I'm a big fan of these types of tools. So if anyone wants to do a software demonstration, please shoot me a note. I'd be happy to sit down, but didn't know if that was quite appropriate for tonight. But just an area that we think could be really powerful. Along the same lines as an event management tool, we spent time thinking about a customer relationship tool, or a CRM, as people call it in the industry. We know that West Fargo proper as a city is invested in a really robust software tool that offers some of this capability. And so we did talk about ways to leverage that existing tool. We also talked about ways that the library might be able to invest in low cost options to manage customers or users in a different way. We think about the value of a customer management tool really to be able to target people in a more specific way. Thinking about, who are the folks that are coming to movie night, or who's coming to story time in the afternoons, and being able to segment that audience and continue to advertise to them through direct mail or email. A CRM tool is going to make that a really easy thing to do. as I said at the onset, I think thinking about investing in some of these operational tools are going to allow this young, energetic team to be able to do more. I'm surprised at what they're all doing without some of these right now. So I can't really imagine what's going to be possible if these are things that you choose to support or Chris is able to incorporate into the work. Along those lines, these three things all come pretty closely together. So customer management, event management, and then feedback tools. Like I said earlier with the storytelling, thinking about with storytelling, thinking about those testimonials, but also understanding, are people liking the events that are taking place? Are people finding value in them? One metric that we look at a lot is called a net promoter score. And so you probably all have filled out this question at one point in time, but on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend an event to a friend or neighbor? We think this simple 1 to 10 point score is a really powerful tool. And I think can be a really great way of getting sort of a pulse on the community. It can be for a single event, it could be for the whole library. But we think that some sort of survey feedback tool would be really helpful. I think kind of the why behind all this, or why we got so specific on those sets of tools, is really to be able to reach more audiences and do more of the good work. We know that Carissa and team have some really great goals in terms of reaching new audiences and continuing to serve those that are already coming to the library. And we think that some of these 21st century tool sets can really elevate that. The last area that we focused on, which is more of something we're creating as an open source tool for the community, is a diversity, equity, and inclusion checklist. So this DEI checklist is a series of questions and provocations that event or program organizers would ask themselves before creating an event. Thinking about transportation needs, does food need to be offered at the event? If so, are there dietary restrictions? What time of day is the event happening? Or do people have to take off work in order to come? Thinking about observed holidays and days of the week that might conflict with different populations in our community. So this is a living document that we're excited for the library team to start using and starting to build upon, as well as we build on in our own events and share with other partners. But that was really the last element that we think is going to be a booster to the programming that's going on. So with that, I covered a lot pretty quickly, I realize, but want to create any space for questions on the event audit, and then do have some thoughts on our next phase of work, which is the survey. And so I think that's going to be a valuable space for myself, hearing from all of you a little bit more on that. Well, hearing no questions, I'll move on to the survey portion of our work. So we really covered the, sorry, as I'm floating into my bookshelf, I noticed, sorry if that's distracting. So one thing that we've really been excited to work on is this survey. So this will be a big piece of our work together with the library. So we're in the preliminary phases developing the survey, but wanted to reflect some questions back at all of you as board members, knowing that you're always considering the long-term and the public interest in the library. And curious to hear from you, really what information you're hoping to learn. Like I said, we're in the development of the survey questions, trying to understand what we can learn from the public. We're thinking about this as almost a kind of a water temperature test. What is the pulse of West Fargo citizens as it relates to the library? What can we learn about their habits and routines and ways that the library can better serve them or promote differently? But wanted to create space for any comments or thoughts from all of you and things that you're curious about, or decisions that you have on the horizon that we might be able to curate into the survey in a way that makes sense.
I think this is Alana. I think that I would like to hear maybe how the location of the library encourages or discourages use. I know and I also know they do a lot of outreach, and I think that's important to check into how those locations encourage or discourage use of the library. Larry, I think you had your hand up.
I always have my hand up. And I would encourage demographic information to be solicited in as finely as possible. Age, occupation, race, education level, services desired, library usage. Do you use the library? Yes, no. That would be helpful. I don't know that people would take the time to fill out a why or why not open-ended question. So perhaps some options could be given with an other box so that they could fill it out. Alana mentioned location. People are going to wonder how it's going to be paid for. And I don't know how a question like that can be answered or asked. But I would be most interested, I think, in the demographic information and correlated to library usage.
I
Yeah,
appreciate that call out. Oh, go ahead, Jody.
I was just going to say, I think this is our one opportunity to cast the widest net. And so just like Larry and Alana have described, I think, you know, asking those demographic questions and correlating that to the answers of, you know, what your preference on location, or asking the question of why you're using the library and what services you're using, yes or no, why or why not, what services do you wish the library had, or what would encourage you to use the library if you don't? Those are key. And this is our opportunity to reach those folks who aren't already coming to the library. So I feel like that's our really key reach with this survey, potentially, hopefully.
And if we can't ask for specific addresses, then maybe a map of West Fargo divided into quarters and ask which quarter they live in.
Yeah, spot on. We have some work on this already in some of our preliminary research in terms of trying to identify areas. And then to your comment, Larry, about the fidelity or fineness of the demographics, we often refer to those as cross tabs or cross tabulations, so we can segment the data differently. And so we're very interested in as well in some of that information around demographics. I think too, when it comes to usage of programs, we're also taking a almost sort of consumer reports approach, or like consumer findings, to understand how are people spending their time and money elsewhere. We think that there's trends to be found in that, where sometimes it can be hard to ask someone who doesn't go to the library, why don't you go to the library? Because it hasn't crossed their mind. But I think trying to understand, are you spending money at a bookstore? Are you spending money on other educational opportunities, or your kids participating in extracurricular activities? We hope to be able to find some trends in that to be able to reach more folks. I think another element that we're thinking about is really trying to get a sense, and this maybe speaks, Larry, to kind of your question around, you know, hard to formulate a question, you know, would you pay for something more? Or we're not sure about this venue in terms of that's the right type of question. But I think what I'm really hoping to find out is what is the public perspective about the library? And that can help us inform the approach moving forward. Is there public support for the library, more generally speaking, and for the value that it brings to the community? And I think thinking about that in different quadrants or a 5-decile kind of curve will help us understand, is there an appetite for the library largely, or is there not? My sense is that people who do use the library really value it, but trying to understand from people in the community who maybe aren't active users, what is their sense of the value the library brings to them as a non-user? So kind of specific, but that's kind of where we're thinking about trying to get some information for all of you to help consider as you make decisions.
I just have a quick question. How are you getting this survey out to the public?
Appreciate you asking that. It's a good tee up. We have been developing what I think to be a pretty robust marketing strategy. Chris and I are working on finding a time to invite some of you to help us think about getting the word out, almost as sort of an action team. Our hope is to really have champions across the West Fargo community that see the value in getting feedback to help promote it. So we're working on developing what we hope to be an effective earned media strategy. We've been working with Melissa and the comms team from West Fargo to think about the best approach for maybe trying to get some news stories, radio interviews, etc. We've also been working with other municipalities, have found direct listservs to be a really beneficial way. So finding organizations that are willing to send an email to their customers or to their supporters to ask for folks to fill out the survey. We hope to do some giveaways, perhaps. Of course, social media and insight marketing are some of the other avenues. We haven't quite set an objective for number of responses, but in the past we have seen a couple hundred, which would be a really strong response rate that I hope we can achieve.
I think the other questions are more pertinent. And so I don't know how long the survey is going to be, but if it is long enough, perhaps a question about taking into account the last 12 months, like, have you used a service from the library via technology that you've never used before? Just maybe to find out if there's something that we can take going forth that the public really liked that they weren't using before. So just taking into account the last 12 months as well.
Will the survey be limited to only those people who live in the city limits, or would it be possible to extend the reach of the survey west of here to incorporated and other incorporated and unincorporated areas of Cass County?
Our thought at this point is to not limit the audience. We're going to have that geography question that we can filter by, but our hope is to reach the largest audience possible. So if someone from Horace or someone from Castleton is using the West Fargo Library, we think it's important to hear from them as well. And so we're taking probably a larger approach and then able to filter down based on how people respond to geography.
So I know we just mentioned rural Cass County, but is there a way to incorporate? I'm sure we have at least some users from the city of Fargo. Is that something you're considering as well?
Yeah, so in our geography map, we're thinking about those different areas and what fidelity we need to have. I don't know, and this is a question for Chris and I to work through, if it's relevant to understand if they live in North Fargo or South Fargo, or if it's just Fargo in general, in terms of an area on the map that they would be selecting from. We are thinking about how to collaborate with the West Fargo public school system, knowing there's a overlap in service area with municipalities, but also that jurisdiction of library access. And so we hope to find some champions or connect with champions in the West Fargo public school system that are willing to help get the word out. Partnerships is something we've been thinking a lot about, particularly in terms of the survey and feedback, but also when it came to the event audit, is how to cultivate and maintain stronger partnerships. And I know that there's a history of that as well. I think the Little Red Reading Bus is a great example of that. We think that there's a lot of potential with the school system, I should say, from our perspective.
And it is worth noting that we treat every resident within the West Fargo Public School District the same in terms of library card access. So in terms of who can get a resident card for free, it's the entirety of the school district. But then of course we have reciprocity agreements with the Fargo public library system and the Laurel system. So yeah, we definitely work in partnership with other libraries in the area too.
Joe, before we wrap up, I want to go back a little bit. I was taking some notes and I'm not quite sure if my notes are accurate. But before we talked about the survey, you talked a little bit about the diversity and equity checklist. And I'm just wondering if you are going to include anything from within that checklist or questions related to that checklist in the survey.
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked a little bit about wanting to ensure that we're able to reach a broad breadth of neighbors in West Fargo, and ideally be able to have the survey respondents at some level be proportional to the demographic data. And so that's when it comes into partnerships for us, and thinking about who are organizations or nonprofits in the community that work with underserved demographics. So we think about a number of nonprofits that serve new Americans, and we think about youth outreach and senior outreach as demographics that can be challenging to get to sometimes. We also plan to publish the survey in 2 or 3 different languages if budget allows, and then be able to translate those back to providing hard copies. We have a diversity and inclusion individual that we've been working with on our team. We've also been in conversation with Letitia Hellerud, who I know has been working with the city of West Fargo to gain her insight in this space. So yeah, I'm really hopeful that this can be an approachable survey for people, and that we're able to get a really broad breadth of response. Our tentative timeline right now, if all things go well from a creation standpoint, is to launch the survey mid next month and let it run for 3 to 4 weeks, depending on how our marketing plan pans out. Carissa, before I depart, is there anything else that you want to add from the event survey or leading up to, or sorry, the event audit or leading up to the survey that I missed or might be relevant for the board here this evening?
I think that you covered it very well. So I don't think I have anything to add. Does any other board member have any other questions for Joe?
No, I think we're all looking forward to the results of this.
Well, appreciate the time this evening. Please be on a lookout from a note from Carissa or I. We'd love your help as board members and community volunteers to help get the word out on the survey. So we're hoping to have an action session coming up here to spend some time ideating with some other partners on how to make sure that this is reaching the most number of people. So I appreciate the time tonight, and thank you for your interest in this work.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is proposed staffing changes and budget adjustment.
Thank you, Alana. So as of February 2021, the library has 2 vacant positions that require modifications before reposting in order to provide efficiency and alignment with the needs of the library. And these modifications will necessitate an adjustment to the library's 2021 operating budget. So tonight, I'm going to summarize the proposed changes and then open it up to you all for questions and any discussion. So I included this information in your packet. Like I said, I will summarize. So first, I'm proposing a change to a position that's currently vacant titled Access Services Manager. And I'm proposing a change in the position to make it a Deputy Director of Public Services position. The Access Services Manager previously was responsible for oversight of customer service and public-facing services in the library, so things like technology assistance, reference, readers advisory, circulation, those types of things that are offered in the library and offsite. And the majority of our staff at the library provide direct customer service or public-facing services as part of their work. And so what is needed is a single deputy position with the authority to oversee that entire function to ensure cohesive service delivery and training and evaluation and implementation of the library's goals in that area. And the current structure has siloed the oversight of customer service and public-facing services and doesn't allow for that clear authority and succession in the absence of the library director. And as we go forward in the coming years and hire additional librarians who report to the youth and adult services managers, that job class is going to continue to have substantial customer service and reference duties in addition to programming and collection development duties. So ensuring that we have a reporting and communication structure that appropriately relates customer service in library services offered and programming is very essential. The second position vacancy that I'm proposing a change to is the position of library specialist. This position description includes duties that have been reorganized into different departments over time as our usage and operation has grown, necessitating a revision of that description to bring it into alignment with the needs of the technical services department at the library. So these changes would necessitate a moderate change to the library's 2021 operating budget, with the most substantial financial impact coming from the change of the access services manager position to the deputy director position. Minor pay grade changes were recommended by the city's compensation consultant for the change to the library specialist position description and for the library director and library service manager positions in relation to the addition of the deputy position. I am requesting an adjustment to the 2021 library budget in the amount of $35,000 to cover the costs of the proposed staffing changes. That cost reflects an effective date of April 1st, 2021 for the deputy director position and an effective date of March 1st, 2021 for the other position changes. In future fiscal years, we would plan to budget for these costs as we normally would. But for 2021, I'm proposing that we utilize our reserve fund to cover the costs for these position changes in this year only. So to summarize, the current vacancies are present opportunities to bring two key positions into alignment with the library's needs, improve our structural efficiency, public services, and our succession plan. Filling the deputy position with a vacancy instead of requesting the position as an addition in 2022, for example, will substantially reduce the library's operating budget request next year. So I recommend your approval of these proposed staffing changes and budget adjustment. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to all of you for questions and discussion.
I just want a clarification to make sure I understand
Yes.
what this is.
Yep.
Okay, so are you basically taking two positions and renaming what they're doing so that they get an increase is kind of what that is? So that they have more responsibilities, more duties.
In the case of the access service manager, that position has a higher level of authority, so they would have more responsibility.
Okay.
But
Are you rehiring or promoting within?
Nope,
Or?
they're currently vacant, so they'd be posted and we'd get applicants.
Okay,
So nobody is in the positions, they're vacant.
okay,
So I'm proposing that we use two position vacancies to sort of modify the positions to make sure that they align with the
Okay.
library's needs before we post them as they are.
and
yeah.
so in the 2021 budget, though, those positions were already budgeted as they currently.
As they currently are. Yep.
Okay.
So that's why it's not as if we're adding a whole new position. The position was there. So
They're
what
just
I'm
adding responsibilities.
exactly. So I'm proposing a modification,
Okay,
which in modifying those positions and getting them regraded by the compensation consultant, the cost for them changed.
okay.
So that's
But
the
there's already enough money there to cover that. But, and then the following year, it won't.
exactly. Yep. So the difference is the $35,000, but the positions are there and the majority of the costs are already budgeted for. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yep. And then in subsequent years, we would budget for them as normal.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And did I read that correctly, that Tina Fisk she's reviewed this and is okay with it? Or did I imagine that?
Yep, you did. Yep. I've been working on this with Tina and the HR department as well. Yep.
I respect her a lot, so that helps me. And of course, I respect you a lot as well. So I think, sounds like the two of you have put a lot of thought into this.
Alana, do we need a motion?
We do need a motion. I just want
So-
to,
I would move to approve this request so that discussion can continue.
Larry, I just have one question. Sorry.
Larry wanted to have a motion in a second so that we could
Okay.
discuss it and then
Sounds
vote.
good.
Larry has moved to approve the motion, correct, Larry?
That is correct.
So is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Mandy has second. So now we will go on to discussion. Jody, what did you want to add?
So I was just looking, since the access services position is essentially removed or reallocated to a new position. I was looking at the previous responsibilities of that person and where they had moved. So I'm just kind of outlining my train of thought. And so the largest sort of thing that caught my eye was outreach. So now outreach is moved to the adult services line of supervision. Can you sort of relay to me the impact or any sort of discussed impacts of moving that supervisory responsibility to your adult services librarian?
Yeah, that's a great question. So really, I think that outreach is a growth area for us. So
Mhm.
when we talked about the Little Red Reading Bus proposal, for example, remember I talked about how a position that we are gonna need to give strong consideration to adding in coming years is an outreach services manager. And so I think that that is the long-term solution for us to have that area properly managed. So really though, right now, the access services manager position had been overseeing outreach at adult living communities, senior living communities. However, outreach is already a function that is supported by multiple departments. And it's kind of that way because it has to be right now because we don't have an outreach services manager to oversee it completely. So it's not really a large functional change for us. And the youth services team has been overseeing outreach to daycares almost exclusively. And so it is a large part of what we're doing, but the programming team are really the ones who are doing a lot of that work. And I think that what we need to plan for in coming years is for that to be its own service manager position. And I think that that is the long-term solution that we need to aim for, but the Deputy Director of Public Services will work with and oversee and support the adult and youth services manager position. So they will still oversee outreach work as a service area, just like they would programming. And programming and outreach, they are somewhat flexible areas, right? Because programs that we offer off-site, we kind of bucket into that outreach category. So the programming team is already and has already been doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And the access services manager historically had overseen our book delivery, for example, to our senior living communities. So really the main change there in terms of outreach and duties is shifting oversight of book delivery to our senior living communities to the adult services manager, which I think is an appropriate next step until we can make that next step down the line to really make that its own service area in the library. And I do think that's something that we need to plan for. So that's a really good question, Jody.
Carissa, when we vote on this, are we approving the job descriptions as well?
Yeah, so John, you can weigh in on this, but I could we just have one motion that is approving the position changes and the budget adjustment, or would we need two?
The board could have one or two. It's really up to the board how they want to handle it.
Okay, well,
My motion was to include the position description, and it was to include all of this proposal
okay.
for approval.
So the motion that's on the table is to approve the proposed staffing changes and budget adjustment. Carissa, my specific question relates to, as I was reading these, a lot of these have a minimum qualification. The last one listed is a valid driver's license, and you weren't, I'm not sure if you were at the meetings. It was, but before you were hired, the board really evaluated the descriptions of all the jobs. And I think that was something we changed, that we didn't necessarily require a valid driver's license because we didn't want to eliminate any applicants. Do you guys recall anything about that?
Barely.
Yeah, that I do recall that, speaking about that, yes, we didn't want to exclude anybody that didn't have a valid driver's license and maybe took, public transportation, for example.
That's
I-
also my recollection, dim as it is.
I will weigh in on one aspect of that. I think I love the idea that we would make that more open. I can say that in West Fargo, having these jobs and not having a driver's license and doing this job would be extremely difficult. I mean, speaking even for me from the director position standpoint would be tough. And we don't at the library have access to our own set of fleet vehicles, you know what I mean, that you could use if you had a driver's license, but not your own car. And I think it would be hard given the number of offsite meetings and partnerships that we have. I think in other municipalities, past places that I've lived, totally doable. Here it would be hard because of the lack of public transit.
Is that for the deputy director job specifically? The
It's
driver?
an
Pretty
all of
much
them.
all of our job descriptions across the board require a valid driver's license.
Your position does not. If I remember correct, that is a change we made. And I'm not saying that it wouldn't be a
Yep.
challenge, but I am hesitant to put that as a requirement for an applicant to have a driver's license. But that's my opinion. Does anybody else have thoughts on that?
I mean, do all those jobs, do each one of them actually require the need to drive between locations?
Most of our, I would say, librarians, service managers, the deputy, and myself require substantial amount of driving, yes, to meet with stakeholders, partners, go to offsite locations, offer outreach services. A lot of our staff are engaged in it. So
Or
Yeah, I think it's.
do you throw it as an option? If they don't, then they're required to provide their own transportation.
I agree with that.
Because then they have to pay for an Uber or taxi or whatever themselves.
John, maybe you have legal advice for this before we go down some rabbit hole that we don't need to.
So you certainly can, as part of a position, include the requirement to have a valid driver's license. I would say that if you're clearly hitting on the right questions about whether or not it would be required for the position, I would think a director level probably would need a valid license, and that they maybe could drive a city vehicle if needed. Now, if it's just a position that's working at the front desk, they may not need a driver's license. I think it really is a question as an employer whether the position is would reasonably need to have the ability to drive a vehicle.
Jody, Steve, or Larry, do you have thoughts?
I'm afraid not.
Larry, I'm shocked.
Well,
Steve or Jody, do you have any thoughts you'd like to add?
That's a tough one. I don't want to exclude anybody. I mean, what happens if the applicant lives across the,
Right.
what happens if the applicant lives across the street from the library? I mean,
I would say one thing to keep in mind too is that we do have to require it on some in order for us to do our outreach work. So,
Maybe required for the deputy director and not for the others.
My question is not the driver's license, because I know people who work who don't have a driver's license but have transportation available to them at all times. So my suggestion, and we can discuss it, is to move valid driver's license to preferred qualifications, or just change it to access to transportation, or there's something there. And just so you know, as I'm looking at the Deputy Director of Public Services, preferred is spelled wrong on preferred qualifications.
Noted.
I kept looking at it, trying to figure that out. So those are my thoughts, but the board is obviously can make their own decision.
I think I'm with you on this. If they are able to provide their own transportation, I would feel that would be acceptable. Where the city.
So ability, perhaps change valid driver's license to ability to, or availability of transportation or something. I'm just hesitant to approve this and eliminate opportunities. But if there is a position that absolutely requires that one person transport themselves,
And I think
support that.
one thing that I'm thinking about is not that they transport themselves to work. It's that they will need to be able to drive, for example, our outreach vehicle. You know what I mean? So for some of them, we would need to require the license. They don't need to have the car. You know, they could take public transit to the library, but then their job might require the use of their license to do their job, if that makes sense.
Yes, it makes sense.
So right now.
Take these books to the senior center. I'm sorry, I don't have a car. And, you know, I can't afford a taxi, then there's a problem.
That is a good point. Also, I mean, sometimes the city has vehicles, and so if even a person that doesn't have a vehicle may be required to drive a city vehicle to make a delivery. And so that when you generally look at job descriptions, you want to know if driving is one of the things that they may be doing.
If you wanted, we could do an audit of them, I suppose, for really pinpointing which ones absolutely do need a driver's license and which don't. I'm pretty certain that most of them have that as a requirement currently.
Well, I think we can approve this, and maybe it's a human resources issue to delve deep into, because ultimately it's the city who will be on the hook for this. But I think that we have brought things to attention, and you guys can work with the city as needed.
Yep, sounds good.
Is there any other discussion about the motion to approve the proposed staffing changes and budget adjustment? Okay, we will move to a vote. All those in favor of approving the proposed staffing changes and budget adjustment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passed. We will now move on to the adjustment to 2021 budget to support 2021 Little Red Reading Bus expenses.
Thank you, Alana. So at the October 8th, 2020 meeting, the library board voted in favor of assuming ongoing operating expenses of the Little Red Reading Bus program. The proposal included a budget for 2021 operating expenses associated with the program in the amount of $10,000. I am bringing this item back around to the library board because this budget change is an adjustment to the total 2021 library budget in the amount of $10,000. And so separate approval for this action is needed from the library board. And the utilization of the resolution permitting me to make budget amendments does not cover this type of action because it is a change to our overall budgeted amount for 2021. Repurposing funds in a given fiscal year to be used in that fiscal year would be a budget amendment and would fall within the parameters of the resolution. But an adjustment to the overall budgeted amount does not fall within the resolution. So my request to the library board is to approve an adjustment to the 2021 budget in the amount of $10,000 to support 2021 Little Red Reading Bus operating expenses.
I will move to approve this recommendation.
Larry has made a motion. Is there a second?
I will second.
Steve, second. So the motion is to approve the adjustment to the 2021 budget to support 2021 Little Red Reading Bus expenses. Is there any discussion?
Just real quick clarification. Maybe I missed this when I read it or forgot, but that we already have the money to cover that, right? Yeah.
Yep.
This is, yeah, and we discussed this in the October meeting. It's kind of just a language change to make sure we've
Okay.
covered our bases.
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, hearing no further discussion, we will vote on the motion to approve the adjustment to the 2021 budget to support the 2021 Little Red Reading Bus expenses. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passed. Moving on to the director's report.
Well, I am gonna talk about Giving Hearts Day, which is today, February 11th, because we have had an amazing day going all around West Fargo and spreading the word about our campaign to raise funds for the Little Red Reading Bus Summer Bookmobile route and a new program that we hope to start in 2021 that is a kindergarten readiness program that we're gonna call Ready to Read. So we have been working super hard on this campaign, and before the meeting started, we were at just over $13,500 of our total $15,000 goal raised. So we did a fantastic job. And before, in the month of January, we started by raising $6,500 in early sponsorship donations or early match donations. And so our early sponsors were Gate City Bank, Capital Credit Union, High Point Networks, Bayer, Minn Kota Recycling, Onsted Twitchell, Blue Cross Blue Shield, KLJ Engineering, AE2S, Choice Bank, Epic Companies, and Erie Insurance Agency. And then for the last month, we've canvassed West Fargo with a marketing campaign, and our communications specialist, Ellen Rosso, has done just a phenomenal job in telling our story and the story of the Little Red Reading Bus and in building awareness for this campaign. And today we drove around the city making stops to chat with Mayor Dardis and former Superintendent Dr. David Flowers. We chatted with students at Willow Park and stopped at Legacy Elementary to meet up with Superintendent Slutty and Stephanie Shea. And we stopped to meet up with 3 of our champion match sponsors who supported $1,000. And those were Gate City Bank, Capital Credit Union, and High Point Network. So we got around today and it was a great day. And we want to share with you a video that we got from a special donor last night. And Lauren is gonna tee that up.
I donate my money to Little Red Reading Bus because I like to read. Because my cousin Ella likes to read. Bye. Bye.
So yes, we had a lot of support and a lot of special donors, and we are very thankful to all of them. And yeah, just really blown away by how much this community supports literacy and its youth, and they really clearly recognize the important role that the library plays in setting our community members up for success in life. So we should all feel really, really proud of that. And I am just excited to continue to grow the service of the Little Red Reading Bus and our outreach services and reach youth in our community this summer. So I only have one little other comment on the director's report. So if anybody else has any questions about Giving Hearts Day or comments, those would be welcome.
The social media today was fantastic on Facebook. I followed your journey throughout the day.
Yes, and it was a journey. It was a great journey. Yeah, you can check out our Facebook page. We have lots of videos up there from our travels today and our different stops. And we are doing a lot of thanking of our sponsors throughout the day. So yeah, as you interface with people who work at those businesses, be sure to give them a nod and say thanks, because their support is really invaluable to us. So big thank you to all of them. We are, my last little tidbit, and because it's kind of it's a holiday that is easy to forget about, is that we are closed on Monday, February 15th for President's Day, and we will be open back to normal on February 16th. So I just wanted to mention that as a reminder. And if nobody has anything else, I'll turn it over to Lauren, Youth Services Manager, to give a programming update to the library board.
All right, I'm gonna pull up a quick slideshow here, or maybe. All right, so programming update for January. Some of the programs we had going on this past month, we did a virtual author talk. Danielle Teagan and the Fargo Fire of 1893. We had some Zoom trivia on Letterkenny. We did a virtual cocktail class. There was an employment and job skill panel. Our mitten tree finished up January 9th. We had 326 items donated this past mitten tree year, which was wonderful. So we got those out to some of the schools last week, just in time for this cold snap. So that worked out well. And we had our kind of stable programs with the book clubs, Twisted Stitchers, and one-on-one genealogy assistance happen virtually as well. For Beamstack Challenges, we have one going on right now. This is a partnership with the Heritage Middle School Library Media Specialist, a winter reading challenge with them. So this one has a few more kind of activities, trying different genres type things. So getting kids out of their comfort zones a little bit with reading. And right now there's 238 kids kind of actively participating in that. And that'll continue through March. A big kind of project that the programming team is working on is implementing the outcome-based planning and evaluation process in our kind of planning process and how we kind of organize our programming that we offer. So this is a 5-step process. The first part is to gather information. So that's doing some market research and community assessment. So that's reaching out to community members, actually talking with them, looking at some data and research, and then kind of analyzing that to move on to step 2 and determine outcomes. So the outcomes are written to reflect the positive change in a person's life as a result of using the library. So really focused on what the patron's getting from using the library and kind of having those very intentional outcomes or goals for our programming. The third step is then to use those outcomes to develop the programs and services. The fourth step is to evaluate. So this has been a big push for us, is just doing a little more consistent and intentional evaluation of our programming. So we can actually demonstrate that our outcomes are being met and that we've achieved those outcomes. And then finally, to share those results. So with our library staff members, with the community, with library board and other stakeholders. So our first big project that we've been kind of using this application on is for our summer learning programming and also including the Little Red Reading Bus. So with this, what we did this past January was meet with a few of our mobile library task force members and some other community members to just ask them like what they need in the summer, what they want to do in the summer, what they like to do, barriers they see in the community, all different aspects of kind of life for community members in the summertime. We also looked at some demographic data and some of our patron data that we have. And we took that and came up with some themes and wants, needs, barriers that we saw come across frequently. And we came up with these 6 outcomes here for our summer learning programming as a whole. So that first one is youth and adults enrich their minds and bodies through experience-driven programs. Families build meaningful relationships with each other and their community. Underserved community members participate in the summer learning program. Youth maintain language arts skills. Parents and caregivers discover and strengthen skills to support their child's learning, and youth are engaged learners. So our next steps with this is to take these outcomes and apply them to some program planning for summer. And then we're also using these for our Little Red Reading Bus route plans and working with the mobile library task force as well. So that's kind of where we're jumping into with our programming currently. And then some upcoming programs we have going on. We're gonna plan to do some outdoor story times, snow pant themed story times once we get past this cold snap. hopefully. We have some more Zoom trivia happening. The next one's on Parks and Rec, the TV show. We're going to do a Valentine's craft class when we have our book clubs and Twisted Stitchers. And then we're also working on a sort of take-home job fair with Job Service. They weren't able to do their normal job fair in person this year, so they're doing a little bit different version this year. We're going to try to do it sort of a take all the resources with you type situation. And that is the programming report.
I have a quick question. With the Zoom Live with the authors, are those recorded at all where people can go back and access those and watch those?
Yes, I believe they get posted on our YouTube channel.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, most of ours, except for, like the trivia, but most of them we do try to record and have up on YouTube.
Okay, perfect.
I want to say what a great job the programming team has done in what Lauren was describing with preparing and tapping the community to get more information before we plan what we were going to do this summer with the summer reading program and the Little Red Reading Bus route. They've been doing a great job. We talked to a bunch of different people in the school district, the park district, some parents, and got good perspective that we developed those outcomes or goals around, and then the team will work to develop programming that meets those goals. And some of the themes that we learned about are reflected in the outcomes that Lauren mentioned, but people want full family activities. They want to be outside. They want to make sure their kids are learning, but especially in the summer that they're having fun while they're doing it, that it doesn't feel like a overly academic experience. And so we're like, this is great feedback. We can take that and really develop our programs mindfully to meet those needs. So we're excited about that. And they did a great job interviewing a swath of people. So yeah.
Thanks for the programming update. I think it's my favorite part of every meeting. It's very fulfilling to see what the library does, because we don't always see that in the board agenda. So thank you for that. Is there anything else to add to the director's report? Carissa, do you have anything?
Nope.
Okay. Is there any other business? Okay, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Larry has made a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there a second? Anybody?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Steve. We have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion adjourned. Thanks for joining, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.